of the Advertising Club of Edmonton. I want to thank our partner CMA for collaborating with us once again, and today's sponsor, who also helped make this possible, ZGM Modern Marketing Partners. Before I hand off to Jan, I have a number of updates and reminders. The next few months are very jam-packed, so bear with me. If you've not had a chance to check it out, our new website is launched. We are very proud of what our friends from Sonder Creative have built for us. Please take time to check it out and to update your profile. Also, just a reminder, we still have our new member promo up until tomorrow. And for any members with upcoming renewals, or those of you who may have just renewed, do not fear. You will be receiving a loyalty code with your renewal reminder email. The awards, big update. ACE Awards High Chaos. Tickets go on sale tomorrow, March 16th. This year, we have the ACE Awards weekend that includes the Judges Breakfast, Friday, April 22nd. This will be a virtual event once again. We have the ACE Awards Saturday, April 23rd. This will be a hybrid event. The in-person show viewing will be held in the private hall at the South Common Rec Room. The in-person event will stream the recording of the show. This will be a casual event that will include pre-show mingling with appies, drinks, and post-game party at the Rec Room. There is limited capacity, so hurry and buy your tickets. There will also be a virtual option available for those who would like to view the stream show or hold a private viewing party of their own. Students, a reminder, the Creative Speed Mentoring event is tomorrow, March 16th. Just an update with regards to the Sea Change program. Stay tuned. We have more details to share for this updated activation with our newest partner. Just a reminder, the AGM date has been set for Thursday, March 12th. And just to tease you a little bit, upcoming program coming May 30th that Idris will update you more on at the end of our event is Becoming an Elk. It will be a fireside chat discussing how the name change from the Edmonton Eskimos to the Edmonton Elks occurred. Jan, I'll pass off to you quickly to speak on behalf of CMA before I introduce our host. We really appreciate your support in collaborating with the CMA for this DEI series.
Oh, thank you, Scott. And thank you to the Advertising Club of Edmonton for including us again in this incredibly important conversation. You have a lot to cover over the next 90 minutes, so I won't take much of your time other than to just formally say thank you to the Advertising Club of Edmonton for including us. And thank you to our marketing community. We are the Calgary Marketing Association. However, one of the good things that have come out of the pandemic is our virtual events, our webinars have allowed us greater exposure to the marketing community. And in particular, we've been able to do some wonderful events that have included Edmonton and ACE. So all I can say is that we've got some great events coming up, both virtual and in person. If you ever were considering joining the Calgary Marketing Association, now would be a great time because we have a members only cocktail party and AGM live and in person coming up on April 7th in Calgary. And we have a number of events, both virtual and live, coming up through the remainder of April into May and then June before we take a break for the summer. So please just check out all that we have to offer: membership, events, partnership opportunities, blogs, job postings. We have just a fabulous job board for those who are posting and those who are looking to change or start a new job. And all of that can be found at www.calgarycma.com. So once again, thank you for including us. And with that, I will turn it back to you, Scott.
Thanks, Jan. Just a reminder to everyone, please turn on your speaker view. That will ensure that you get to see the panel. Diversity, equity, inclusion, what worked? In this panel conversation sponsored by ZGM Modern Marketing Partners, we strip away the jargon of brass tacks conversation on how 3 separate organizations created and implemented their DEI programs. Our guests include leading companies in each of their fields. I'm happy to introduce our host, Panita Sandhu McBrien. Panita is currently the executive director of the Downtown Association of Edmonton. In her own words, she is the lead convener, activator, and advocate shaping downtown Edmonton's future. Panita is no stranger to the Ad Club, having held the president's chair back in 2020, and she's a most welcome host for this landmark conversation. Thank you for hosting our event, Panita. I will pass off to you now.
Thank you so much, Scott. I'm really happy to be here. I'm seeing a lot of familiar names and faces trickling in, which is really exciting. I still consider myself a member of our marketing and advertising community, even though my current job only includes about this much of that. So thank you all for being here, and thank you to CMA and ACE for hosting these conversations. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. It's absolutely critical to the future and success of our economy and of course, our advertising and marketing industry. I'm going to start by introducing our panelists, which I'm so excited about. So panelist number one, Myrna Bittner. Myrna is the CEO and co-founder of Run With It Synthetics, an advanced data modeling and visualization company designing decarbonization, sustainability, equity, resilience, and growth initiatives globally. Myrna is passionate about connecting today's technology, policy, and infrastructure choices to data about the impacts and outcomes for people and our planet. Last year, the growing Run With It team celebrated numerous international awards. I can't even name them all here because I'm going to stumble over it, including the United Nations Global Call for Decarbonization, Taiwan's Top Technology Gold Medal, Toyota Mobility Foundation City Architecture of Tomorrow Challenge, NATO Space Awareness, along with the Most Edmonton YEG Startup. Run With It is a woman-led, certified and Aboriginal business with a GBA Plus certified team of diverse and talented 3D animators, designers, and scientists in social, data, computing, and engineering disciplines. Thank you for being here, Myrna. We're so excited to have you. Next up, Jordan Mayer. As the Director of Value and Innovation at ZGM, part of Jordan's role is to identify gaps in the agency, areas that need to change, develop, or grow. Through this lens, Jordan worked with two ZGM colleagues to develop the Equity and Diversity team. The Equity and Diversity team has been working for the past 2 years in a variety of areas to bring more equity and diversity to the agency and the greater communications community. Jordan is also past treasurer, board member, and president at ACE, and former ZGM leadership team colleague of mine and ACE board colleague of mine. So I'm really excited to see your face, Jordan.
Yeah, happy to be here with you, Panita.
And last but certainly not least is Christina Milkey. Christina is one of the managing partners in Sprout VC, which is launching a second fund that will invest in early stage Western Canadian B2B software as a service tech startups. As well as being an angel investor herself, an A100 member, and sitting on various boards, she spends her time supporting the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Edmonton by both mentoring and participating on the board of advisors with Threshold Impact Venture Mentoring Service, a world-renowned mentoring program with a local branch operating at the University of Alberta, and coaching and mentoring many entrepreneurs on various aspects of their companies. Good to see you, Christina.
Thanks, Panita.
Okay, one quick housekeeping thing before we dive in. So we will, of course, be taking questions from the floor. So as we're chatting along, if you have a question that you really want to ask and you want me to ask it, just go ahead and drop it in the chat. And then I'll get to that when we get to our audience question section at the end. But if you want to ask it yourself, you also have the option to do that. So if you want to ask a question yourself, just put your hand up. And then when we're doing Q&A, I will call on you to turn on your camera and ask your question yourself. So those are your two options, chat or raise hand if you want to ask a question. But I know I could easily fill this time with all the questions that I have of our panelists. So setting the stage for this conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I'm going to start with some quick definitions in case this topic is new for anyone. So when we talk about diversity, we're talking about the makeup of organizations. We're talking about what backgrounds they come from. We're talking about gender, ethnic background, socioeconomic status, education level. All these things can make up diversity. When we're talking about equity, we're talking about how equitable is the experience and the opportunities afforded to all those people, regardless of what background they come from or what their current life circumstances are. And when we talk about inclusion, we're talking about how included do all of your humans in your organization feel in the day-to-day operations of the team, in the social cohesion of the team. And as we all know, in the middle of COVID and what we've all been adapting to, inclusion has been a really, really tricky thing to get right recently. So with all of that in mind, I'm going to start with Myrna for the first question. Sorry, Myrna, you were the first I introduced, so that's just the way it is. And I'm going to get all of you to answer this, but we'll start with Myrna. From your view, what is the value of getting DEI right in your organization?
I think for us, it's been everything. I think particularly the lens that that we bring internationally into the futures that people are asking us about. It's enabled us to build just an amazing team. It's enabled us to have an amazing perspective and bring that perspective and have that perspective welcomed and respected around the world. And it's a huge part of now our business. So we actually get to inform, utilities about the sustainability and about energy equity and stormwater equity. And it's becoming a part of, the competitive landscape that we offer. So it's absolutely everything. I can't see us getting to where we are and addressing the problems of the world that we're addressing without it. It's foundational.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Jordan.
Yeah, I think as a communications agency, it's our role to connect with people, to tell human stories, to be emotional. We can only do that to the best of our ability when we have a whole bunch of different people from different backgrounds and different communities that help us understand how to connect with people, help us understand different stories. And by doing that, I think we can do a better job of communicating and being a really, really good advertising agency. And I think it creates better work. Like hands down, without question, diversity of thought, diversity of opinion creates better work. But not only that, I think that we're then able to do a better job of actually connecting with people, which is pretty much the entirety of our job. So I think it's very important from both of those sides.
Yeah, thanks for that. Christina.
I'm going to approach this from two different really important parts of my professional life. So one of them is in my fund. And I'm sure people have heard many stats these days about the lack of funding going to potentially, or primarily female founded companies, but also we could make some analysis around folks that are also have other visible diversities and lack of funding going to them. And so one of the things that became really apparent in our fund was the fact that my two partners and I, between the three of us, we have quite a bit of visible diversity ourselves. And so we want to make sure, we believe that that's set us up to be able to make more informed and better considered decisions when we're making investment decisions. And because of that, that really drives us towards wanting to make sure that we have opportunities to meet with founders that also have visible diversity, because we believe that there's just better outcomes that are going to come from those companies. So, we're in the business of a return on capital. So we want to make sure that we can provide the best return of capital that we can to our limited partners who are our investors. And to do that, we believe strongly that that's going to happen because we make diverse decision-making at the team, but also that includes looking at diverse founder teams as well. And on the VMS side, the Venture Mentoring Services side, we provide an opportunity to do free mentorship to primarily University of alum founded companies. And when I started, I was one of the founding mentors in this program. I'd say right at the beginning, we had a great diversity from a mentorship, but over time, we noticed that there is a lack of diversity occurring. And so if you looked on our website, you would see, generally speaking, a lot of white males. And so when you're thinking about a company who's thinking about coming to you for that kind of mentorship, and if they were to go on the website and they don't see anyone that looks like them, it's hard to attract great founders to come to the program. So we became a lot more thoughtful about how we could change that dynamic.
I feel like our host is frozen.
She is
Anita is frozen, yeah.
I'm like, is it me? Did I?
I was
freeze
like,
her out?
yeah,
I don't know.
I was looking for blinking people.
Oh, now she's gone.
She'll be back.
Technology. Well, we need to fill in the space.
I think you know, being able to see and understand, Christina, I agree, is a part of that step, and being thoughtful about you know, how an organization looks too. You know, it means that it can be completely different, you know, differently considered, whether people can approach it or not, depending on what they see. I think also, you know, for us, and I'll just fill in some blanks, you know, while we're waiting for Panita, but you know, from the tech company, even looking at those different types of mentorship groups and the capital groups, you know, where I have tons of investor conversations ongoing every day now. One of the interesting things for us is how they consider diverse founders. And so it's not just, you know, do you have this kind of on your board? It's how do you look at people's backgrounds or experience or career interruptions or dedication, or, you know, because there's this list of, did you work for Stanford, Facebook, you know, Google, you know, are you a Harvard dropout, you know, kind of that's a typical, you know, kind of shortcut to, you know, particular capital considerations in the tech industry. And it's being able to, you know, a lot of even investment firms now are stepping outside of that shortcut, and they're actually asking completely different questions before they look for those, you know, visible kind of touch points that are more typical for the industry.
Well, having been a female in my whole career, I can tell you through my own lived experiences, the 100% of the time that I've worked in fields that were predominantly male dominated, and I was often a minority, and a very small minority in some cases as well. So especially, you know, in venture capital, it's still a very male dominated field. And so one of my biggest things with my career today is I want young women to see my face in venture capital, so that they can look at that and go, well, if she can do it, I can do it too. And they can do it.
I'm so glad you kept the conversation going. My computer.
Well, it was an awkward silence without you, Panita.
Literally the first time that has ever happened to me on this computer, of course, in the middle of an event. Sorry about that. But hearing what you were just talking about, I kind of want to keep that going, because one of my questions was, when we talk about representation, so when we talk about diversity, a lot of times we're talking about recruitment and hiring staff, but can we talk a little bit about the importance of diversity at the decision-making level, whether that's leadership team, whether that's a board, and how you've taken that on and addressed those inequities in your world? Maybe I'll start with you, Jordan.
Yeah, good question. You probably know the answer to this question a little bit, Anita, so thanks for handing it to me. Yeah, I think that we as an agency, this is top of mind for sure, amongst all of us. We do, in all transparency, have 5 white straight male partners for the agency. And that, I think, you know, there's 2 parts to that. One is the fact that there is no diversity in decision-making there at that level. And I think that we've done 2 things as an agency to sort of combat that in a certain degree. One is the full commitment of those 5 partners towards the equity and diversity team. which is a big thing. I think when you have 5 white straight male partners, you need to go above and beyond in your equity and diversity work to make sure that you're recognizing that, and you're doing everything you can to work towards an equitable and diverse future. And I think too, we've got a leadership team at the agency that has a lot more diversity than that upper level partnership. And that's very important, making sure that those decisions go through the leadership team as well. There's consultation, there's back and forth with the partners to get a diverse perspective on things, and make sure that equity and diversity is a lens that is filtering through the decisions the agency is making and the directions the agency is going.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jordan. And it's so true. Like, I mean, trying to implement these changes and make these decisions and do it well when you're starting from a place of, feeling like you're behind is a little bit different than building that in from day one. So on that note, I'm going to go to you, Myrna, to talk a little bit about building that from day one.
I think, like Christina was saying, I've been a woman, my whole career. So, I mean, it's building it from day one. I see things completely differently. I had career interruptions. So I had a son that was born at 25 weeks, and that closed my very first software venture. I walked out the door and into the hospital and didn't return for 6 months. So, there, and those things, I think, give you an entirely different perspective on the candidates that you hire, the leadership team, how women represent themselves differently when they come to an interview. Their resumes look different. You find them in different places. And thankfully, because I'm a woman, I naturally kind of migrated to women in tech groups and women who code and women in business. And so that enabled me to be in those rooms where there were people that I, kind of understood their differences from the typical technology, rooms and founder rooms and CTO rooms. We also are a certified Aboriginal business. So my partner in business and life is Métis. And we represent that also proudly on an international stage in terms of deep tech, and to show the art of the possible. And that, I think, is really important, because we have come out and we decided to do that at the very beginning, announcing our representation. It was important to us, and that has attracted to, diversity attracts diversity. So, people look at us, they see us as a place where there's all kinds of diversity in background and expertise and experience. But they also see that our policies have formed, and our practices and our work culture has informed to envelop and celebrate and actually, kind of make the most business-wise as well, because of our diversity. And so I think that's one of the interesting transitions, is when you are very conscious, whether it's because you're coming from the place that you are, but those policies and the development of your organization then just continues to snowball. There is, we have a overrepresentation, for example, of women on our team, and it's because they see, this is a place where we were remote first before COVID, so you can have kids and balance lifestyle and if necessary, our hobbies and so we offered some really conscious different ways into working for a deep tech company that I didn't see, in many other places on the market.
I love that. Christina, we were kind of talking about this right when I reappeared and what that's looked like for you over the years.
Yeah, I think, I'll refer to VMS. One of the things that, in order to really get intentional about a DE, or we call it EDI, not DEI, but and how we could incorporate that more thoughtfully into the organization, we needed to create awareness. And it's funny because the words that we keep talking about, even in this conversation, are equity and diversity. And the word inclusion isn't getting used as many times. And so one of the ways that we wanted to create that awareness is, every couple of months we do what's called a mentor rally. And in that mentor rally, we would have the companies that are coming in to look for mentoring do a pitch. But on top of that, it's an opportunity to share updates and things like we did at the beginning of this call. And we did this exercise where we asked everybody some very, very specific questions, because we wanted to make sure that everyone kind of got what we were trying to accomplish. And it became very apparent very quickly. So we said, please, we're on Zoom just like this, please leave your camera on if you come from a single parent household. Because that doesn't matter if you are female or male or you have other visible diversity. And then we did another question like, please leave your camera on if you ever felt like you weren't part of a group that you were involved in because of your religious background. Or if you ever felt like there was a joke made that you felt uncomfortable about. And it was amazing. By the time we asked about 10 different questions that were part of almost everyday life in some way, shape, or form, everybody had to turn their camera off or on at one point. And so then it became very apparent to everybody about how important the concept of inclusion is, because people can feel not part of something by something simple as something that somebody said. And it's not obvious and it's not intentional, but it can make people feel like they're not part of the group. And so I feel like there's just a real opportunity for folks to create that level of awareness before we even start going down these making policies. I mean, Myrna, when you're female or if you have a visible minority, that's very obvious, that becomes like a no-brainer. But for folks that don't have that as prevalent in their organization, I guarantee there's many, many opportunities that they haven't even thought of where people that work in that organization or that group have felt like they weren't included. So how can we create that awareness to ensure that the folks at the top who are building opportunities or are building policies can make sure that they're very, very cognizant of the potential for that to happen?
Can I build off of what Christina was just saying? That just feels so much harder in like a virtual format than if this was like real life, but I'm just going to jump in and hope I don't cover anybody else up. I agree with what Christina's saying. And I want to talk about the inclusion word because I think it's an interesting word and there's kind of two sides to it and they're both really important. And for us as an organization who, as you mentioned, Panita, this is starting not from the ground up, but like we're an existing organization that has to break a lot of things down, look at our systems and look at our approaches things to be more diverse. And we specifically removed the word inclusion from everything that we did. So we're the equity and diversity group. And there was a lot of intent behind that because of the fact that we've existed for over 20 years. And the idea of inclusion in a lot of ways is about bringing people into what you're doing. And when we wanted to be very intentional with that to say, the way that we're doing it is not right and is not okay in a lot of ways from an equity and diversity point of view. We don't want to bring people into, a straight white agency and have this be the culture and the story. We want to open ourselves up. We want to take out the inclusion side of things. We want to make people welcome and feel a part of our agency as themselves and not as a part of who we are. And specifically because there was an article posted in Strategy Magazine probably a year and a half ago, and specifically went out and talked to and looked at people of color, BIPOC individuals, and asked them, why are you underrepresented in agencies? And the answer wasn't, oh, I don't think I'm good enough to work there, or I don't want to work there, or I don't think it's right for me. The answer was, the culture doesn't fit who I am, and I don't think I'd be welcome. And for me as a person in a leadership position in an agency, that was devastating for me to hear that position. And so very, very intentionally, we said, this is not about including people into what we do. This is about making ourselves open and welcoming to a new generation and a new diverse talent set and allowing them to create their space that we can promote, as opposed to including them within our space.
It's a really interesting way to frame it. Thanks for that, Jordan. It makes a lot of sense. And I think, but the other thing is, like, inclusion is a day-to-day effort too that you have to make. And so I have a hypothesis about DEI that I'm going to throw out there and ask you to respond to, along with a question. So I have this theory, and the ad world, the agency world is guilty of this a lot of times, and the tech world is guilty of this a lot of times, especially the startup community, where companies that pride themselves on a really strong culture and like a family sort of environment, which I always think is a bit of a red flag, often are the most homogenous. And sometimes there's good visible diversity. Sometimes you've got good gender balance and different ethnic backgrounds, but really everyone was born in the same city, everyone went to 4 years of university, everyone kind of comes from the same worldview. And so the reason everyone's an extrovert, which is really common too, or at least has to pretend they are. And so because the reason you've got this really great culture is because you've sort of recruited and formed this culture that then, to Jordan's point, everyone joining on has to then find a way to fit into. So that's kind of my hypothesis, that if you feel like your culture is really easy and natural and feels really good, you're probably not doing diversity, equity, and inclusion very well. So my question to all of you is, am I full of shit on that? And two, what is really hard about DEI? Like, when you think about, what you've built or what you've gone through and what's worked and what hasn't, what's been really difficult, whether directly in the implementation of DEI work or what becomes hard in other parts of your organization? I don't know who wants to go first on that one.
I'll go first. So you're sort of full of shit, but not 100% full of shit, Panita. So in the tech space, I mean, I meet tons of founders who are looking for capital, and I can tell you that I'm seeing a lot more folks on the team that aren't necessarily from the same city or even the same country. Right, with this ability to work remotely, we're seeing teams made up of people from all around. And I think you're partially right in the if they're talking so much about, oh my gosh, we have this great culture and we're just a family, I think that is a bit of a red flag, because frankly, I don't want everybody to agree on things all the time. I think that's the whole point of EDI, is that when you have that diversity, you always don't agree. And that's what brings you to a better conclusion at the end when you get to whatever that finish line looks like. So if I hear that all the time, you're right, I'm going to have a red flag. But I can tell you, I'm seeing more and more companies now and founder teams that are made up of folks from various places, various backgrounds. And the other thing with founders that may seem like a bit of a, homogeneic team is, you have to be a bit addicted to chaos to be on a founding team. That is a commonality. If you aren't okay with ambiguity and chaos, you're not going to last. You shouldn't be in that organization at that stage. So there has to be some camaraderie around that particular trait. Otherwise, the team will fall apart. So. And then what's been really difficult, I think, is more the, getting buy-in and being genuine about it. These are trendy things these days. I hear about EDI everywhere all the time now. But I really love, Jordan, what you're saying about, first of all, owning who you are, not pretending you're something different, being open to acknowledging that you need some kind of different way of thinking. And then, exploring how to do that. I think that's an amazing story. And I feel like you're authentic about it. It sounds great. And I can feel it from you when you talk. There needs to be more of that going on, because there's lots of teams out there that, don't have that diversity. But if they just say it because they think they should say it, it's not gonna happen. And people feel it. I mean, if you're interviewing a woman or someone that doesn't fit into your team today visually, we're going to feel it. Trust me, we'll feel it.
Yeah. Myrna, I just saw you go off mute.
Yeah. So, do I think you're full of shit? No. I think that there are some some real, kind of foundational parts about the culture that enables our team to be a welcoming place for diversity. So, and there, things like respect and humility and curiosity, and they're just ways of, and so, not everybody fits here, but that doesn't mean that, that we don't have a ton of attention to, diversity and being able to respect the different places and experiences and ways of communication that people are coming from, when they come to our team. So that I think is really important. I think that there is, this idea when it comes to founders in the tech community that we will have particular character traits. I'm not addicted to chaos. I'm an extremely risk-averse person who manages and runs a revenue-funded, profitable deep tech company, and so I would challenge that there needs to be some diversity in thought too when it comes to different teams. There's this myth of technical teams or technological teams that has gone on, for a long time, have been perpetuated about that they're, socially awkward, that they're, come from, dropping out of profound schools, that they're, male pale and some of them not stale yet. They look for young, they look for that kind of chaos and all in. And yet when you look back at history in technology, some of those founders, they were working two jobs and, creating their tech startups. So they had plan B and plan C, and they were not 100% in, and there was not 100% chaos. So those kinds of things, I think, are one of the things that we exist to kind of be mindful of and watch, because we as a very different technology company run into many of the short circuit, this is what you have to have in a team, kind of verbiage, and we don't fit. And so it's automatically you're over here. And it's like, no, actually, we are an incredible company doing incredible things. But yes, we aren't boys in t-shirts, that have that kind of unique characteristic, no matter what the visual diversity is. We actually position ourselves over here, and this is what diversity is about, is kind of breaking down that kind of unconscious bias or focus on homogeneous characteristics. So that's one of the interesting challenges that we've had as a technology company, is to say, yes, diversity, it looks different. It is different. That's what, difference is.
I love that. I love where you started, which is that your core values as an organization are what sort of join everyone together and makes that selection easier. And it's not like you're welcoming everyone no matter what, because they do have to share and be able to buy into those core values. And that's a great anchor point. I love that. Jordan.
Yeah, the first question, are you full of shit? No, Panita, I'd never say you're full of shit about anything. And no, I don't think you're full of shit on this one either. I think especially in agency world, we can run into the issue of there being a lot of the same. And I think that, we're a relatively small and tight-knit community. And that's probably part of the problem. And breaking that inclusion side of it out and trying to bring in more diversity is very important to the community in general, and not just, ZGM or a single agency. I think like one of the things that we've tried to do lately, a lot of our hiring focus in the past has been, do you have a friend? Do you know someone that would be good for this position within the company? And we'd send that out, and they would find someone and bring it back, and that would be a good source of hiring people. And yeah, it is a good source of hiring people. You get people that are talented because they're the same, and you get people who are easy to find because you get them through referral. But the problem is that just builds a lot of the same. Chances are, if you're this person, you're friends with someone who is relatively similar to you, and that just brings in a lot of the same. And so, from a hiring point of view, we've really tried to be cognizant of that. And although it's not that we don't do it, it's just that we take an extra special look at it. And we also make sure that we're doing other channels, and that's not our sole source of recruitment. It's very important that we are sourcing that diversity from multiple different sources and really getting the best talent. I think also from the core values point of view, that's very, very important. Like our set of core values are very important as a GM. We use them in our reviews, we use them in our hiring process. And that's kind of a bit of a way to try and break down some elements of culture and make sure that we're hiring based on the kinds of people that we want, and that those core values are very universal. And then I think your second question was sort of what's the hardest part, or what was the hardest part of equity and diversity. And I think for us, again, as an agency who's been around for 20 plus years, we have a lot of systems in place. And I think the hardest part is seeing where the challenges are. As trying to bring more equity and diversity into the agency, being able to see the systems that are in place and that on the surface don't appear to have anything wrong with them. But then when you actually get deeper into it, understanding, okay, this actually needs to be broken down. And I'll give you an example of that. And a lot of this is hiring practice. We've recently employed a tool. Our HR team has recently employed a tool. It's free online. And it's kind of an HR tool. And basically you take a job description and you throw that job description into this tool, and it gives you a rating on how masculine or feminine the posting is. So it looks at the word choices, it looks at phrasing, because there are certain things and certain words and certain ways of phrasing things that would skew to more, a feminine approach or more of a masculine approach. And so we've tried to, without that tool, we would just look at them and someone would read it and be like, this is a great job posting, I love it, put it out in the world. Little do you know that when you put it through this tool, it kicks it back and says, this is an overly masculine job posting, and will probably only receive masculine, job recruits. And is that really what you want? And it's given us the opportunity to step back and try and take out, because it does highlight the words and phrases throughout it and gives you reasons as to why those words would skew more masculine or feminine. And it gives us the opportunity to kind of neutralize those to make sure that we're getting the talent pool from both sides of the gender. Actually, that was wrong. I should not say both sides of gender. The gender's a spectrum.
The whole spectrum of gender.
I apologize
I know what you meant.
for saying that. All forms of gender.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it is fascinating how much technology exists now to sort of assist in some of this.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I want to talk a bit about GBA Plus, because I know this is one thing that we wanted to touch on, because now, so we at the Downtown Business Association, we're sort of a child of the city of Edmonton in a way. And obviously the city of Edmonton is really emphatic about applying a GBA Plus lens to anything, whether we're applying for grant funding, whatever it is that we're doing. And so I've learned a lot about that framework through this role. And I know, Myrna, your organization is GBA Plus certified. So can you talk a little bit about why that is and what that means?
Sure. I think we were exposed to that through one of the procurement channels with the federal government, and when we read about it, we have been doing a lot of that work and using that lens, because we deal with a lot of data and historical data collections and historical policies and built environments that and policies and programs that don't have that lens. And we had, just given the composition of our company, really been sensitive about that and wanted to take every opportunity we had when we were creating populations in cities to really pay attention to intersectionality and that when we saw that program, that was just like, kind of instant alignment with what we were doing. And so we made it a part of, again, our, core principles and practices. So in your first day at Run With It, that's, you work through the certification process. And we revisit it. Almost weekly, because there are so many, opportunities when we're presented with modeling environments today, and then modeling practices and policies in the future. It's so important to be able to uncover as many of those unconscious biases, conscious biases, infrastructure experience of people and with those policies and programs, and bring those to light. And we have the opportunity to do that. And so it's really become something that's foundational. We have discussions about language a lot, discussions about, even named historical data sets that are gathered by, Statistics Canada, and when do you step in, and how do you involve or engage groups that you may want to include their voices in defining the way populations are described, and different types and groups of people who want to be identified are described in going forward. So there's a lot of GBA plus that I think can stay alive inside an organization and really used as a frame.
Yeah, I think kind of what Jordan was describing, that HR tool, like that sounds like essentially a gender analysis of the gender-based analysis plus is what GBA plus stands for, just for everyone who's new to the term. Google can give you more information about that.
And it's so important in the artificial intelligence world, because a lot of AI perpetuates, like it trains from historical data, and it perpetuates those biases. In fact, it disguises them. It obfuscates them in a way where you think you're choosing successful candidates, and yet really what you're choosing is a candidate that's been successful inside a biased framework in the past. So I'm really happy to hear about those tools, that there are tools that are where that's turning, artificial intelligence towards, the bright side rather than the dark side, and say, let's begin to kind of unpack that.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, like, again, coming from the advertising agency world, like thinking about things like user experience and copywriting and all the things that agencies put out into the world, like that GBA plus lens, not only for building teams and like how our organization functions, but yeah, what you're putting out into the world, this is all really important to that too. Christina or Jordan, do either of you want to jump in on the GBA plus? No? Okay. Okay, awesome. Christina, question for you. You talked a little bit about this, but I guess more specifically, so as an investor who's trying to assess the likely success of startups, when you're thinking about what's an indicator of success and all the different, obviously, things that you're evaluating, how does DEI play into that decision-making process for you today, and has that changed over the years?
For sure. So I think about, well, here's an analogy that most people can probably relate to. When you see a founder, then you ask them sort of, give us a lay of the land for where your financial future is going to look like. And you get the old hockey stick that goes up, and, and most of us that are investors go, well, we know that's really not going to happen. But if it's not there, we're questioning, why isn't it there in the first place? It's a silly game that we play. So when you meet with women founders and you take a look at what their forecast is, it's funny because the hockey stick is never as prominent. But I know, because I'm a woman, I'm not 100% for sure that, I tend to, when I put out information that's about something in the future that you're forecasting, and there's always uncertainty when you're forecasting, is I would generally make sure that I put in things that I feel like I have a strong confidence that I'm actually going to be able to accomplish. And I feel like a lot of female founders do the same. And so we know that I know that when I see a forecast for a female, from a female founder that's going to demonstrate to me where they think their revenue is going to be in the next 3 to 5 years, I tend to have more confidence. Now, this is my bias now, right? as a female, and I'm fully admitting it. But I feel a lot more confident in that number because I feel like women tend to be, more conscientious about making sure they put 100% what they're going to be able to achieve, because they're worried about if they don't achieve it, how does it impact their professional brand and their ability for people to count on what they say. And so again, this is a generalization. I don't want anyone to go, not every woman's like that. You're right. Not every woman's like that. And not every man puts out a big hockey stick, but there tends to be trends from the number of pitch decks that I've now seen and the number of companies that I've talked to. I feel fairly confident about forecasts coming out of female founded pitch decks. That's just an example. But just because someone's a female founder doesn't mean we're going to make an investment decision in them. Of course, we factor in a lot of things. The team in itself. I would say that if it's a bunch of only women, we would consider that, is that a fully diverse team as well, right? So I think it's not a simple situation when you're talking about stewarding other people's capital. There's a lot of, ethics involved in that, and professional ethics as well, because if you don't do well in a fund, you'll never raise another fund. So we care a lot about how we steward that capital, and we want to make sure that we're making really great decisions. And that just means doing a lot of due diligence on the people that we're investing in. We can't always do a lot of due diligence on the companies themselves because we invest in early stage companies that don't have a lot of historical background, but we can take a look at the founders, and the founding team is very, very critical for us when we're making a decision.
Yeah, thanks for that. That all makes a lot of sense. And you're right that our own biases come through, whether good or bad, in that. But I feel really strongly that way too, that there's this different approach to leadership and forecasting and planning and our
Risk
level of
aversity.
risk aversity.
Yes.
Absolutely. That
Yeah,
when you
Marina, you
balance
talked to
for-
it. Absolutely.
Yeah, when
Yeah,
you balance for gender and background.
I always stood up and stood aside in a lot of rooms because I was told, you should learn how to blitz scale, you should fail fast. And I'm like, no, I want to succeed slowly. Like that's me. I would rather succeed slowly than fail fast 10 times over. So, I think there is a difference in sadly, women typically get about 1% of the capital. So that not necessarily, I mean, it's very different in different parts of the world, but women are horrifically,
Underfunded.
have lack of access to capital. And when we do have access to capital, a check size for a similar firm with women founder as, it may be $500,000 which is drastically discounted from, the 8 million that a male founder gets for exactly similar kind of trajectory and company. So, and yet diverse companies with diverse leadership do, massively better in terms of EBITDA. So the rationalness of not understanding the opportunity and diversity isn't there, even when it comes to the capital side.
I totally agree. I mean, we track it in our fund. And so in our first fund, of the 10 deals we made, 70% of them had visible diversity on the founding team. And if all things being equal, if we have two exact same companies with the same opportunities, which is, I know is very difficult to imagine, but one has a diverse team and one doesn't, we will pick the diverse team because of the diversity. We care enough about it that it's a criteria for us now.
I love that. Two questions for you, Jordan. The first is from the chat, just quickly. Can you share the name of that tool you were referring to?
Yeah, I'd have to look it up because we found it like a year ago and our HR team has been using it since then. So I'll have to come back to that and get it to you in some way.
Excellent. It was Rubina asking that question. Okay, and then a question I actually prepared for you, not from the chat. So it's so rare, I think, for an agency, or maybe not anymore. Maybe I'm already this out of the loop, but I think for an agency to have built or set up a diversity, equity, inclusion, or diversity and equity team within the organization. So I'm curious about why that team exists and what exactly they do and how they function, and what kind of oversight that gives into those initiatives in the organization?
Yeah, good questions. And I like our equity and diversity team, I want to say is like 2 years old now, and like started post you, I think, like after you left ZGM.
It was just forming before I
Yeah.
left. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and it's not been a long time that we've been doing this. I think that in that 2 years, I read a lot about it now. Now, is that because I'm in equity and diversity and what I do, and thus like I just see all the agencies that have it, or is it because actually there are a lot more agencies focusing on this? Maybe a little bit of both. It's interesting. We're also starting to see it in RFPs. So specifically, some larger organizations are asking some very detailed equity and diversity questions. So that is very important. We did it before that. It wasn't a result of, oh no, RFPs are asking for it, so we better do it. And somewhat sadly to say, like it did come out of George Floyd and the movements that happened around that. We really took a step back, and at that point we're like, yeah, like we need this. We probably needed this a long time ago. We can't just expect that things are going to correct themselves and that it's going to be okay. We need to actively do something. And so that's really kind of the impetus of starting our equity and diversity team. And then, yeah, I think hopefully most agencies have this. I think they should have this. The role that we play within the agency isn't detailed in terms of, we're reviewing creative work or we're looking at briefs or things like that. What we're doing is more on a high level, kind of global scale for the agency. We are looking at processes and programs within the agency. So one of them was HR, and actually Shannon Sutherland has just posted the gender decoder tool. I'm pretty sure that's the exact same one. It's a free tool. It's awesome. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking at as an agency level. We're also, looking at how we do work as an agency. So one of the things that we're currently working on is personas. And personas are a tool that agencies have used, and it's actually it's a very common tech tool as well, to build the persona to show how to bring a whole bunch of data together and have that help inform decisions and help inform process in simplified fashion. The problem is the personas can be very stereotypical, and also personas can be very white and very gender specific as well, and very heteronormative specific, which is all things that lead down a path of, similarity. And that's something that we're very closely looking at right now. How do we still take all of that data and simplify it in a really easy way without being so stereotypical and without falling into the traps of being so heteronormative and gender specific and white focused? Because those kinds of things won't actually make the best decisions for our creative work at the end of the day, and won't be representative and won't help us, filter through so many important decisions in the right fashion. So that's kind of how we're operating as a DEI group right now. We're focused on high level things, programs and systems within the agency, and how we can actually improve those to bring more equity and diversity into the agency, as well as bringing more equity and diversity into representation in the work that we do.
Awesome. Thanks for that. It's really interesting. And for Christina and Myrna, have you heard of, or do you have any sort of formalized teams, or is it in anyone's job description to sort of provide oversight or hold organizations accountable to DEI goals? Or is it sort of just so, for Myrna especially, that's so embedded in your organization that that's not really a thing?
For us, yeah, it's really embedded. I think as we grow, we'll need to formalize it. But now it's so, everybody is so kind of hyper aware and looking for those things. And because of the GBA plus, certification and our repeated kind of conversations, we haven't had to formalize it. But I think, if we start using HR agencies to do our hiring, then we're going to have to be concerned about their language. So I really appreciate, the gender decoder kind of tool. If we, as soon as we start getting to be a certain scale where we aren't, kind of seeing it every day in each other. And I think we'll have to formalize. Absolutely.
That is such a good point. How much harder this stuff gets at scale when you as a founder especially don't have, that direct connection all the way through. Christina, anything to add on that?
In VMS, what we've done is we have struck a committee of 4 people that are very passionate about this topic. And their goal is to, we need to set some baseline. Here's where we're at today so that we have a point of reference to be able to measure improvements. It's now impacted our process specifically on the intake side for entrepreneurs coming and applying into the program, where we make sure that we have a representation, because the interview may include sort of 3 people. We want to make sure that we have a set of faces in there that feel welcoming to the particular entrepreneur that we're having a conversation with, and so that they can see some representation for themselves in that team. I became the chair of the advisory committee this year, and the person that runs the program, I believe you know her, Panita, her name is Lazina. And so Lazina and I together are very, very aware of formalizing more than we've ever had before around how can we ensure that we change the metrics in the program to demonstrate that we're doing something that's really meaningful and improving the percentages of companies that are coming in, as well as mentors from where we were even a year ago. So some of it's more informal, the activities like Lazina right away, she walked in and didn't see a lot of people that looked like her. And so she just, naturally started doing a few new things. But then at the board level, we started talking about it together and saying, okay, it's time to start doing something. And so we started having more formal conversations, struck the committee, now we're starting implementation of changes in process and things like that.
Yeah, that's so great. And it is so true. Like formalizing it in the early days, it can feel uncomfortable and clunky. And I think that's natural. So I'm sure there's a lot of people watching who are in that place right now where even having these conversations is just awkward. And
even at a board level, because we had to start there, Lazina and I shared some experiences of situations that we've been in personally. And so other members on the board who did not look like we do, we're like totally shocked by what we've experienced. And it just had not, it's not that they're bad people, it just had not occurred to them. And so bringing that awareness to them and for them to say, oh, wow, like this is not the kind of experience we want people in our program to ever have. That creating that first moment of awareness. And I remember it was at a board meeting, that was step one, and gets everybody on board and everybody moving the ship in the right direction.
Yeah, man, those first conversations are so important. Even if it just if you only get to that in like month 1 of trying this, but having those conversations is huge. Seriously, I've seen it now even more than I could have imagined.
Well, I think about the things that you're trying to do with the safe walks home, right? As a female, I mean, I'm sure Myrna and I can tell you multiple stories where we walked by ourselves at night with our keys in our pocket, like, scurrying around trying to be unnoticed so that we could get to our car quickly from any place. I mean, I'm putting words in your mouth, Myrna, but I've certainly
After out during the day.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not. In fact, we looked at when we were originally getting office space downtown. What were the transit stations like that were close? What were the stairwells like? What was the lighting outside? What was the security kind of record of the building? When we were even looking at co-working space downtown like that, it made a big difference for us.
And how about your new space? How's that working for you?
Really good.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I know that office.
Yeah, really like it. Sorry about the sirens.
No worries. I know.
Part of the culture.
We're in Bell Tower now, and yeah, it's a busy intersection for the sirens. I have a couple questions from the floor here. And so just a reminder, like we've only got 20 minutes left here. So if anyone has a burning question for any of our panelists, now is your time. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Before I go into the audience questions, I have one last question for all of you. The mayor's office recently on International Women's Day posted a photo of their team, which is, I think, predominantly female. It's way more than 50%. It's just like you said, Myrna, it's overrepresented, at least for the female gender. And of course, they posted said photo and got a fair amount of backlash from people out there who seem to believe that trying to achieve gender parity or focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion is not a good thing, and that the word reverse racism gets used. And honestly, I have heard these things, genuine concerns from people who truly believe this, who truly believe that we're setting aside meritocracy, that we're no longer choosing the best possible candidate when we're doing these things. So I just want to ask each of you, have you encountered said criticism yourselves or heard it out there? And just really quickly, because I do want to get to the audience questions, what would be one or two sentences that you would say in response to said criticism? Jordan, I saw you laughing, so I'm going to pick on you first.
Yeah, I laugh to help myself from not crying about that kind of comment. I think quickly, like on the point you made, meritocracy, like meritocracy is such a myth. That's not a real thing. And anybody who believes it's a real thing is probably a white person, probably male, probably straight, and probably like in their 30s, 40s, or 50s. Everybody else knows that that's a fallacy. And the whole idea there is that, guess what? Privilege exists, and the system is built to give that privilege to straight white men. That's fact. And if you don't believe it, I'm sorry. That's just what it is. So the idea that reverse racism exists, no, that's just breaking down a system that has been built to privilege a certain group. And that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. Trucker convoy, sorry. The system is built to privilege you. And when you're uncomfortable with that, it comes out in irrational ways. But guess what? The rest of the world hasn't had your privilege. So I'm sorry. I get upset about it. And I think that it's such a fallacy. And I think that we need to do what we can. Privilege, I think, is one of the most important concepts. I think that our equity and diversity team has been educated on in the last 2 years. We actually brought in a U of A professor, Dr. Farha Sharif. She did a 3-day course, pretty intensive course with our entire staff, and really taught us a lot. And privilege was a big part of that. And understanding that privilege exists, understanding the privileges that you have, understanding the privileges that people don't have, and the whole equity part of that, which is, we have to get rid of the things that are privileges. We have to look at things from a more equal playing field and understanding the privilege that we have. And yes, guess what? That does mean that in certain circumstances, equity is not about giving the same to everyone. Equity is about giving the things to the different groups to make everyone at the same level. And guess what? That means that in some instances, we're going to have to, hire more females and have more of a female presence on certain things. We're going to have to hire more diversity and have more people of BIPOC. And that's just the reality of it. I'm okay with it. I know there's a lot of people who aren't. This whole idea of equity and diversity is very much a journey, and it's a lot of difficult concepts, especially for white people. And I say that as a white person, to understand what this means and understand the privilege that I've had for my entire life, and the things that I can do to help people who don't have the same level of privilege and try and get rid of those systems of privilege. I think it's so important.
Thanks, Jordan. Myrna.
So I bumped into this when I was really rather young. the federal government had employment equity or for federal contractors of all types that landed at the U of A and said, if you're receiving federal funds, you need to report your equality initiatives. And so I was a young MBA student, and I thought, well, I'll see, because, you know, here we're being taught about how business, you know, is all about change and changing organizations and how we manage change. I'll see how the business faculty is managing their change. And I almost left my MBA. I was one of 3 women in the program at the time, and the found out way too much about closeted meritocracy and merit-only societies. Had women faculty who were crying and afraid physically for their safety if they talked to me in our group to be interviewed about this paper, and which was strictly about the change organization practices in the faculty. So, you know, I was like, what kind of exposure was that as a young person, you know, here in Edmonton? And not much has changed. So the faculty, the ratios, the diversity is not there in the business faculty. And so I think that for me, the persistence of that, that privilege, you know, as described, and how tightly it is held, and the power that it provides people is why there is this backlash. Why there is this backlash. Those women were elected to office. There was no, kind of secret push to put them there, even though they weren't qualified, you know, and yet there still is this backlash against, you know, when equity and equality actually happens. And it happens because, hey, we're the 51%. And the second part of, I guess, my statement, you know, is that cities who have diverse leadership, countries who have diverse leadership, businesses who have diverse leadership will beat you any day on the international marketplace, any day. And so the longer they hold on to that kind of necessity for having, you know, white male privilege in pronounced numbers and unrepresented numbers in power in any organization, whether it's a utility or municipality or a business or a tech company, you're not going to win, and you're holding on to something that's slipping away. And it makes me sad too. It makes me sad to see that backlash, because I was celebrating. It was like, wow. In fact, sadly, I was like, how did that happen? But in a good way, you know, because it's so important that it does.
Thank you for that, Christina.
Well, I have to say, there's nothing that lights me up more than the feeling that I'm in a role because of tokenism. You want to get me worked up, like that would be the topic, because I have worked hard in my career. I have worked hard for I didn't come from a family of privilege. I had to work for everything that I've had. I've had to put up with a lot of BS in my career, working for companies that were, you know, I remember being on a management team of 14, and I walked in the room and I was the only woman and I was the youngest. And I, you know, comments like, well, maybe you could take the notes of the meeting. It's like, no, I won't be taking notes in the meeting. Like, you can take the notes actually. But just stuff like that, like the time is over for that stuff. It's done. And so for someone to suggest that me or any other woman got a job because, because of the fact that we're women is absolutely not acceptable.
Thank you. Can relate to that one in a big way. Okay, one audience question I'm going to jump to. So I think we already answered this question, so I'm just going to recap really quickly. So this person says, we've begun our DEI journey. We're a small company. We don't really know where to start. We're small, narrowly resourced teams. How and where do you recommend we start? I think we talked about that. It's honestly just a conversation is such an important place to start. Is there anything else any of you would say to this person who's trying to figure out how to start getting DEI right in a small organization?
I would offer, if you have people that are really passionate about it on the team, let them be part of the solution.
Awesome. Anyone
Yeah,
else?
for sure. I would add to that, and just definitely people with passion are going to lead this, and that's great. I think but you need to have, this has to be top down. Like, it can't be bottom up. It has to have the buy-in of the people at the top. Like, yes, people with the passion are the ones that are going to lead it, but if they don't have the buy-in of the people at top, it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to change anything. So I think that's a very, really important aspect of it. And also a point that Nicola has actually thrown in the chat, and Nicola is a colleague of mine, and also a member of our equity and diversity team. And she reminded me, and makes a good point. We split our equity and diversity team into 3 areas. So internal, external, and education. The internal, to really look at what we're doing as an agency from our internal perspective, what's our processes and programs and procedures. External, how can we be better representative, do more representation, do better work through equity and diversity. And then kind of the key to it all is education for our team. We can't really expect either of the other 2 to really make a lot of progress without education. And so we have an E&D doc series. So we do documentaries where we sit down and we walk documentaries together, and then we have like a whole comment discussion about them afterwards. And then we've done more formalized education where, like I said, we brought in Dr. Sharif and did a 3-day program for the entire staff. And in the fall this year, or maybe early summer, we're still landing on the date. We're going to do another training session, and it's going to be a joint collaboration training session with ACE and CMA that I'm sure we'll talk more about in the near future. But yeah, like, those are the most important parts. Like, education for us, like, we started this March 2019, April 2019, something like that. At the end in January 2020, we had a look at it, and we're like, we have a whole huge list of things we want to do. Why have we really not been able to make a lot of progress on this? And one of the key things that we identified was the fact that everybody is on a different journey in relation to equity and diversity, and in relation to racism and sexism and homophobia and gender diversity and all of these topics. And so we decided to invest, and that's when we brought in Dr. Sharif, in giving as much of a baseline of education as we could for as much of our staff as possible, so that we could help push all of these projects forward. Because when at least we all understand where this is coming from, what privilege means, what white supremacy is, what all of these concepts mean, at least we can get some buy-in and understanding on actually pushing things forward and why it's so important. So that was something that was really big for us, that education piece in a really large formal manner, but then also all the other education that we do in order to be able to get these things moving forward for the entire agency and getting buy-in from as many people as we can.
Yeah, and thanks for touching on Nicola's question. That was going to be the next one I asked. So yeah, have you ever had to call in a client or external partner for their behavior, whether it be racist, sexist, homophobic, whatever it might be? That there's stuff that we can't control within our organization. And sometimes if it means walking away from a client, that's a really big and tough step to take for some organizations, where you feel like you got to fight for every dollar you bring in. And that's a really important choice you have to make.
We've walked away. Had to, because otherwise we weren't protecting our team. Because we have a diverse team, if we put our diverse team in those environments where there is hate and there is phobia, and we're then absolutely violating all of our principles and making them so vulnerable, and asking them to do that, for money. No.
Yeah. Okay, I'm sure Idris wants me to hand it back to him at some point so that we can close up, but I'm going to ask another one here. Janice is asking more specifically, and I guess this is mostly for Jordan, but I'm sure Myrna and Christina, you both have insight on this too. When you structure like an EDI committee, actually I'll start with you, Christina, because you mentioned that VMS has one. How do you structure that? Like, is it intentional about who goes on there? Is everyone an internal part of the team, or are there sort of, is it almost like a board or advisory council where there are external people there to help advise on it?
Well, because we're part of the University of Alberta, we have the luxury of having access to some folks at the University of Alberta. So when we intentionally made the decision to start focusing on this as an initiative, as I mentioned, we asked people who are mentors in the program that really wanted to be part of this, who raised their hand that said they'd like to be part of the committee. We had to build terms of reference around it, but we also brought in some expertise from the university to do some education for us on the board, so that we got a good handle on sort of what kind of things we needed to focus on, and sort of a little bit more on the how. And of course, under the construct of the University of Alberta's focus on EDI as well, because we are part of that larger organization. So it wasn't we made a little bit of an error in that. I wouldn't even say it's an error. We had too many people that were excited about it. The EDI committee became almost too big. Then they tried to do too many initiatives. And then we went, okay, this is not working. It's a volunteer organization. We need to, we're all over the map because there's too many people with too many ideas. And so we scaled back the team. And so that allowed us to be more focused on smaller amounts of initiatives. And so it was great to see that many people passionate about it that wanted to participate. But everybody understood when we said, well, okay, we got to scale this in a little bit and rein it in a bit and try and get more focused so that we can actually accomplish something. People understood, and they're still just as passionate about it, even if they're not on the committee.
Yeah, I love that. I wonder if the question, is coming from a place of, if you're an organization that's maybe a small team and you're growing and you don't yet have the diverse representation that you're trying to achieve, then, is it really that useful to have just your existing team members, or is that where pulling on any additional resources, whether it's mentors, advisors, partners, is valuable?
The other issue that was kind of interesting is, when we put the call out for the EDI committee, we had a few white men who said, well, I'm really interested in this, but I don't think I fit on this committee. And, we had to have some conversations around, well, absolutely you fit on this committee, because we want everyone's opinion. This is an important topic, and all opinions matter, right? So we had to actually kind of talk them into themselves, talking them out of participating, right? It was kind of a funny dynamic.
Yeah, interesting. Jordan, do you want to talk a bit about the makeup of the DNI community?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's very similar to Christina. We had a huge list and a very enthusiastic group, and we wanted to go in 1,001 directions, and it didn't work. I think that was, second to the education side of things, was one of our biggest learnings in getting our group set up. Focus. It's going to be hard because you're going to get a group of passionate people in a room, and they're going to say, we can do this and we can change that and we can do all of these things. And that's great. And, when we do our meetings, we have a list of all of those things, but at the very top of that list is the 2 or 3 things that we're doing right now. And, what are the things that we can actually make progress on? What are the things that we can focus our efforts on? Because we want to do all these things, but we can't do them all at once, especially sort of in a volunteer committee within an agency who has other jobs and other things to do. And so that was really important for us. I think the other thing, so yes, ours is entirely internal. However, when we did set it up, we did seek the consultation of Dr. Sharif. And so had conversations with her to say, how do we set this up? How do we do this? How do we make it effective? Here's our commitment statement. Do you have any feedback for us on our commitment statement and what we're doing as a team? And it was even actually Dr. Sharif who said, I think you should look at the inclusion word in the name of your group and really think about what that means and how it would affect the work that you do, and the people that you're including and what that means. So that was really important for us. So yeah, we had consultation at the setup and kind of went through a whole bunch of that and got really good information. But yeah, we're an all internal team. We focus very much on the internal, external, and education. Those are our 3 areas. And then we really try and boil that down into the 2-3 things that we can actually think we can move in the near future. We got some quick wins out of the way at the very beginning. That was helpful just to show that we're, actually doing things. And we've got some other ones that are longer term that we're still working on. And Shannon, just really quickly to your question, yes, Dr. Sharif, very close, one extra F at the end. She's Google her, she'll pop up right away. Dr. Farha Sharif, University of Alberta. She's fantastic.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Okay. At the risk of Idris getting upset with me, I'm going to fit in one last question really quick because it's a really good one. And I think it's only for Christina. So they might exclude Myrna and Jordan from answering it unless you really, really have something to say. There's someone who wrote privately and said they loved hearing about your experience of the storytelling to the board to help them understand the place you're coming from. Do some environments require that sort of shock and awe to shake them into taking action? Is it an approach you recommend, or is it a little aggressive in some cases, do you think?
Well, I think it was critical because the interesting part is like Lizine and I had an audience of very open-minded people, so that was super helpful. Now, if you have an audience of closed-minded people, I don't know that they're ever going to be shocked or awed, frankly. There's maybe different approaches for that. Ones that I don't know that I can recommend, but for me personally, I might not even be there anyways, if they're not open-minded in the first place. So, but it didn't take a lot of storytelling, and it was only a couple stories. And, immediately it was, wow, I had not thought about it that way. It was just that simple. And so fortunate that was the reaction that we had. I'm grateful for those individuals. They're amazing individuals. I'm so fortunate to be part of this organization that gives so much and helps build a great community.
Thank you for that. I think I can say that for all of you and your organizations. Thank you all for being here. It takes a lot of work and a lot of bravery and a lot of consistency to do this work consistently and deliver the outcomes that all three of you are undoubtedly delivering. So thank you for all of that. Thank you for taking the time to be here today. And thank you to ACE and CMA for having us here. And I'll finally turn it back over to you to close us out, Idris.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thanks to, and thanks and applause to our guests, Myrna, Christina, and Jordan. Thank you, Puneeta, for having this really important and relevant conversation. Thanks also to our attendees. I know that it's a lot of effort to come in and even hear this out and to start taking action on this. I want to encourage you to keep the conversations going wherever you are. I'd like to also offer special thanks to our sponsor, ZGM Modern Marketing Partners, for their ongoing support in our work here. And I must also thank our co-presenter, the Calgary Marketing Association, and Jan. They've been an outstanding presenting partner as well. And we look forward to even more work together, which I'm about to get into, which is our next DEI event coming May 30th, 2022. The location is to be announced, but it is called Becoming the Elks. It's a fireside chat with former Elks CEO Len Rhodes and Alan Watt, VP of Marketing and Advertising. And it's going to be hosted by Holly Fortier, president and facilitator at Nisto, and a producer and also a well-known actor. So this is a chance for you to see and hear one of the biggest rebrands in sports that came from the community, and how an institutional organization was able to turn an issue into a conversation and into deep reflection, and then become an agent of that change. This is an event that's not to be missed. So I want you to keep that in mind for the 30th of May. But one last thing before we do go, we also have some more DEI programming coming up later in June. So we'll be able to announce that a little bit further on and as the weeks go on. So keep in touch with our socials. One other thing too, if you are a new member, we have a 70% off promo. Thank you so much if you have signed up as part of our new website. We are doing renewals at a 70% off promo as well. So any of our existing members, you also will have an offer to do that at a reduced rate. But in the meantime, we will see you at the next event. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great week and take care.